This is the Constructionist Podcast, where we take ancient stories, the person of Jesus, current events and topics, and help you construct a new Christian worldview that's relevant and loving to those around you. I'm your host, Kevin Bates. I'm a semiotician and community builder, looking at the signs of the times to build a better future together. You are tuned into the Constructionist broadcast, and tonight we are starting with a topic of our basic existence, and we're continuing this topic, actually. We desire for you to be able to navigate your life with a framework that is relevant and loving to people. And so I want to encourage you to tune into this online broadcast each and every week, and ways that you can support our ministry is first, follow us, listen to these, engage with them. You can like our social media pages on Instagram and Facebook. You can make comments on the videos and on the social media platforms. And you can financially support our ministry through our website, resonatelife.org, under the Give tab. That's resonatelife.org under the Give tab. So you are joining us live on Thursday night at 8:00 p.m. for this broadcast, and this will be replayed as through the week and as a part of our Sunday morning broadcast as well. So I am joined today with Shreya Bodner and Jake Flug, two of my leaders. Good evening, Shreya and Jake.
Hello.
I'm very excited that you are here. We are starting a new topic today, and I'm going to pull out a few notes here to kind of recap, because we spent approximately
lost it.
Now we're going to unpack some new things tonight.
About how many months, Kevin?
But just to do a recap on what we talked about, we used a Jake, you are lagging way far behind.
I don't think it's me, Kevin.
Let me ask you. That might be the.
I don't think it's me. Shreya, is it Kevin or me?
I think it's Kevin.
Yeah, it's Kevin. Yeah, you're still lagging. Shoot. Well, I think that this might not be a go tonight. Kevin's gone. Shoot. Well, good night, everybody. That was us. I guess I'll come back next week that we're not having as many technical difficulties as we are tonight.
Oh.
And here's Kevin in 4 places. Or 2 places.
Let's try that. Is that better?
Yes. What's up?
So far.
Man, I don't know. I don't know what's up with our technology, but hey, we're back. So how much of that did
none?
None. We heard nothing.
No.
Okay.
Not a thing.
Perfect. Well, should I start from the beginning?
Very beginning.
Okay.
I mean,
thank you.
We lost you at how many weeks or months we'd been in this topic.
So you heard an introduction, you heard a few things. All right.
Yeah.
So we have been in the last handful of months, we've been in a topic of constructing a worldview. And basically, a worldview is a fundamental cognitive orientation of an individual, basically encompassing the whole of an individual's knowledge and point of view. And we used a person by the name of Leo Apostel. Leo Apostel is a Belgian atheist philosopher. And basically, that Belgian philosopher came up with a 6-point framework that develops a worldview. Now, of course, an atheist philosopher is not going to come up with a Christian worldview. They're going to come up with just a worldview concept. So you can add your values of Christianity within the framework. But our goal with developing that framework was not to just give you a framework. We gave you each of our worldviews, but that's not what we were attempting to do, is to just give you a framework or worldview. You have to come up with an explanation of the world on your own. You have to come up with basically where you believe we are headed, after we die, especially, but our futurology, like where are we headed in life? Do we go to heaven? Do we go to hell? Do you believe in heaven? Do you believe in hell? Then our values, our ethical principles, how we do life, what we need to be doing is in accordance to where we think we are headed. It's very, very tightly related. And then we come up with a theory of action. How do we attain what we need to be doing? Then we talked about truth and falsehood, fallacies and folly. And we talked about basically what is true and what is not true. We talked about absolute truth and subjective truth. Is absolute truth even real? How do we find absolute truth? Can we find absolute truth? That was in a segment called The Theory of Knowledge. And then we constructed a worldview. Each of us put building blocks together. We talked about our origins. We talked about our construction, deconstruction principles, and we built a worldview. So that's where we're at as we enter into this new topic, which is actually brand new to me, which I'm excited about. This new topic is on basically well, Sharia, I'm gonna let you talk about it mostly, but just to say this, the title is The Stages of Faith. So Sharia is going to introduce to us the stages of faith by a gentleman by the name of James W. Fowler. And I'm going to let you take it. Why don't you introduce this topic to us? And then my job, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to connect this back to our worldview concept. So I'm going to take this topic and kind of weave it with our framework of worldview. So go for it. Let's hear from you.
Sure. One thing I want to clarify, at least for the listeners, is that the stages of faith is not a complete worldview. So it's not necessarily functioning in the same way as the material from our previous series does. But I at least find it to be a useful framework, and I do think it can fit in that conversation. So there you go. So I read Fowler's Stages of Faith during deconstruction and found it super helpful for understanding what I was experiencing. And that's why I wanted to share it on the broadcast. So we'll take about a minute to find out who Fowler was, spend about 10 to 15 minutes talking through his framework, and then open it up for dialogue. I have a couple thoughts about why I find this framework relevant, and I imagine that Kevin and Jake, you will have some thoughts as well.
I have thoughts always.
You do.
Thanks.
So James W. Fowler, he was a white man, so that means he comes from a certain perspective. He was part of the United Methodist movement as a pastor and a professor of theology and human development at Emory University. And he was also the director for the Center for Research on Faith and Moral Development. So that just gives kind of a brief picture of the focus of his work and his background and point of view. In 1981, he published the book Stages of Faith. The subtitle is The Psychology of Human Development and the Quest for Meaning. So Stages of Faith provides a framework for understanding how one's faith may change and develop over the course of one's lifetime. I think it's helpful to remember that frameworks of this sort are describing a phenomena. So it's an attempt to make sense of a changing faith. It isn't necessarily the way things are or the way that things should be. It's just one way of making sense of observable changes in faith. So take what's useful, leave what isn't. Don't feel like you have to fit yourself into this framework because it's just one tool. Fowler developed his framework after the work of developmental psychologists like Jean Piaget, Erik Erikson, and Lawrence Kohlberg. So if those names are familiar to you, you might work in the mental health field or the education field. If they're not familiar, the important part to know is that they also created frameworks to understand psychological and moral development. Fowler used their work to describe how faith develops. And rather than confine faith to one correct religion, he defines it as a way of interacting with the universe and creating meaning in life. So it's broad enough to include most, if not all, religions, at least in Western thought, as well as some atheistic worldviews. And faith is a way of interacting with the universe and creating life. So that's some background, and we're ready to go into the framework. Is it possible to share the slide that gives the framework? Yeah.
So before we continue, my first thought that I just want to throw out there with stages. When I hear the word stage, do you think that stages are, he gives such concrete ages to these stages? So before people hear this, do you believe that there are concrete ages to stages?
I think there's some fluidity. The ages, and I'll talk about it a little as I go through, but it corresponds with the work of developmental psychologists who do put ages to their stages as well.
Okay. So we'll follow that closely, and then
yeah,
okay.
Like I think it is fluid, and not everybody like fits the mold perfectly, but it's a guideline, an age range.
Got it. Okay, go for it. I'm all
Cool.
ears.
All right, so we're going to look at the different stages, and Jake, feel free to pull the slide up or down or whatever as you find it useful. So there are 7 primary stages, starting with stage 0. Stage 0 is called undifferentiated faith. It occurs from birth to about 2 years of age. If you're into developmental psychology, this corresponds to Piaget's sensory motor phase and Erikson's trust versus mistrust phase. This stage involves developing a sense of security, attachment, trust, and consistency from parents, and that will later form the basis for feelings of trust and attachment to the universe or to the divine. So it's called undifferentiated because the child's sense of faith is wrapped up in the care that they receive from parents. So that's stage 0. Any clarifying questions or quick thoughts?
Not yet.
I don't have
All
any
right.
yet. No, keep going.
Cool. Stage 1 is the intuitive projective faith, where the child begins to use imagination and symbols. Stage 1 starts around age 2 and goes until about age 6 or 7. It corresponds with Piaget's pre-operational stage. This stage is where a sense of right and wrong develops. Faith is very literal, and kids are just learning to distinguish reality from fantasy. So faith at this stage is experiential and develops primarily through hearing stories and the influence of others. And I can actually, I can think of an example from my own life. When I was really, really little, I remember wondering what Bible story was happening in my heart today. And I think the logic there was Jesus lives in my heart, but the stories about Jesus are in the Bible. So the Bible stories must be happening in my heart. And so with that, you can see like there's not a clear line between reality and fantasy. There's an emphasis on the stories and kind of a literalness to it. So that's stage 1. Any clarifying questions or quick thoughts?
So when I hear literal, when I hear concrete, when I hear visual, it reminds me of the Enneagram and people who are, 1s or 8s on the Enneagram take things very literally or concrete, visually. Reminds me of learning styles or learning modalities where somebody's a visual analytic or a visual creative. So that harkens back to Freudian philosophy where people get stuck. It reminds me, it doesn't, it harkens back to that where people sometimes get stuck in stages. So I have sometimes difficulty with others because they are not moving from stage one into, or maybe even a zero. They're not willing or able. They don't have the tools to move from 0 to 1. So I'm wondering if there's like a set of tools or maybe some encouragement that if somebody feels like, they have mommy's faith still, literally, like mommy and daddy's faith, that they live in that primal environment that they need their mom to have or need their dad to have a Christianity.
Yeah.
Is there a tool to move through these stages?
I think that's a great question. I'm not prepared to answer it, but I imagine if I were to find some books,
well, let's just hang that ornament on the tree.
Yeah.
Let's just hang that on the tree a little bit. Since it's Christmas, we can use those metaphors.
Yeah.
Getting too close to Christmas. So let's just hang that ornament on the tree and just wait, because I'm really interested in unpacking the spaces in between. Yeah.
Okay. Stage 2.
Go for it.
So stage 2 is mythic literal faith, and it starts around age 6 or 7 and usually lasts until early adolescence, like 12-ish. And it corresponds with Piaget's concrete operational stage. And this is when information gets organized into stories and moral rules that are concretely understood. So kids in this stage have a really strong sense of justice and fairness. And the stories from one's faith tradition are understood at a moral level. So the Bible stories are there to teach us how to be a good person, what goodness is, what badness is, what is right and wrong. So that's mythic literal faith. Any clarifying questions?
Define reciprocity and anthropomorphic.
Oh,
There's some big words in there for big people.
There is. I didn't look at my diagram close. I think so they're linking the reciprocity of the universe to justice. So I think the intent there is that almost like karma, good people get good things, bad people get bad things.
I was wondering if that's where it was going, in exchange.
I think so.
Quid pro quo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And then deities are almost always anthropomorphic. So at the very least, putting human qualities onto what we believe about God.
So God is related to my father again.
I think so.
My abusive dad, which my dad wasn't abusive, but my abusive dad, let's say I had an abusive dad,
right,
is equated to my,
I think it's that, and also the transcendent qualities of God are a little hard to grasp.
All gods are created as human, in human form. As I read through this, I think, and I just want to pull the ages off of it. A lot of people find themselves stuck in this place. So I think when you start to the next 3 stages are more actualizing.
Yeah.
Where this is very much not reaching that, as you said, transcendence before. That it's very, how does this affect me? But you can keep going. Go for it.
Okay, so on to stage 3.
Yep.
Stage 3 is synthetic conventional faith. It lasts from about age 12 to age 18, although many people stay stuck in this stage their whole life. It corresponds to Piaget's formal operational stage. Stage 3 faith involves an identification with a religious institution, a belief system, or an authority. So defining oneself as a member of this group. I am a Christian, and that is my primary identity. It's who I am. This stage is where one's faith really becomes one's own and not what one grew up with. So I think for a lot of us who were in youth group, we had conversations about what it meant to make your faith your own and not your parents' faith. Because developmentally, we're at that place of figuring out how to have our own faith. All of the individual stories from the faith tradition come together into one big cohesive narrative. So rather than little moral episodes, we're able to see the story from start to finish and how it develops. Kids in this stage develop the ability to think abstractly and to see things from multiple perspectives. So they're able to see multiple meanings in the stories and rituals of their faith. Stage 3 is also where conflicts and inconsistencies can start to come up. But because faith is so strongly tied to one's identity, those conflicts are often ignored. And that's why people tend to stay in this stage for much, if not all, of their adult life.
So there we go. Bingo. So does Fowler actually say that?
Yeah.
That people get stuck in this stage. Okay. So if he's open to saying that, he's possibly open to saying what Jake said is the mythical, literal, getting stuck there maybe too, in a very immature style faith too.
Perhaps, yeah.
Maybe in between 2 and 3, yeah.
It's been a few years since I've read the book.
Yeah.
But I do think that's possible. Yeah.
Good. Okay. Cool.
Okay. On to stage 4.
Let's do it.
Stage 4 is called individuative reflective faith.
Wow.
Woo.
It typically lasts from about the mid-20s to the late 30s. Although, as we talked about, some people never reach this stage. And while I suppose it's possible to stay in this stage for the rest of your life, it's a really uncomfortable stage. So you're just unlikely to stay in it for that long. Stage 4 doesn't correspond with any of Piaget's stages because his framework describes children becoming adults, and we're well into adulthood at this point. Individuative.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh,
yeah, keep going.
Go ahead.
Well, you said that it's uncomfortable. Is it uncomfortable because there's a guilt shame cycle that begins to develop right at this stage?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yep, that's where we're going.
Pretty clear. Okay, thank you. Sorry. Keep going.
So individuative reflective faith is when people start to experience cognitive dissonance and question their own assumptions.
Yep.
So depending on how open their faith community is to this kind of questioning, they might experience a lot of fear or shame and really struggle with this stage. The individuative part, so their faith is moving from identifying with the group to being true to themselves and their own faith. And this is usually the stage when people will either leave their religious community or leave their faith altogether. That can look like defaulting back down to stage 3. So maybe we aren't a Christian anymore, maybe we're an atheist, but we identify so strongly that we're a stage 3 atheist because we didn't want to face the difficult feelings of stage 4. So that's stage 4.
Oh, wow. So there's a lot there. So let's go back to stage 4 when we're done, because I want to.
Me too.
Okay, good. All right.
And then stage 5 is called conjunctive faith. This is usually experienced in midlife, although I suppose it depends on how long you can last in stage 4. This stage is when a person becomes comfortable with the mysteries of faith. So they may have resolved some of their questions from stage 4. They may still have plenty of those questions held over from stage 4, but those questions no longer evoke the same fear and shame that they experienced in the previous stage. There's room for paradox and a sense of peace in the lack of control or certainty. The deep reflection of the previous stage gives way to a focus on community, but without the need to place one's whole identity in that community, as with stage 3. people in this stage are open to the beliefs of others because of the way that it enriches their own. So there's kind of a movement away from relativism and towards what I'd call particularism. So it's less all religions are right and more this religion is right for me.
Versus particularism or with particularism.
Mm-hmm.
Both?
Oh, no, I would say with.
With, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay.
We are actually learning along with you, so this is exciting.
Yeah. On to stage 6.
Yes, please, because I want to know
All
where
right.
I'm headed.
Yeah. So stage 6 is called universalizing.
I'm moving from 5 to 6.
All right. Yeah, we all hope. I think we all aspire to that.
We aspire to 6?
I think so. It's called the enlightenment stage. It's typically not reached until very late in life, and only by very few people. A person in this stage is not limited by differences in religions or beliefs, but treats all with compassion and understanding. And they're able to interact with anyone in any stage without being condescending. They can become important religious figures. So Gandhi and Mother Teresa are considered examples of stage 6 universalizing faith. And I guess while many of us aspire to treat all with compassion and understanding, if we're honest, we often fall short of that aspiration. So universalizing faith actually embodies that compassion, not just aspiring to it.
Okay, I'm not headed there. I'm kidding.
Speaking for myself, it's going to take some work.
So these are the Buddhas, the Gandhi,
Yeah.
Probably the current Pope would be considered a
Dalai Lama.
Dalai Lama, Mpo Tutu, Desmond Tutu. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So those are the stages.
An American, a U.S. citizen, that I would consider a universalizing faith. I know some listeners are going to go, "What is Jimmy Carter?" Jimmy Carter has served on a board of elders with Desmond Tutu and some of the greatest leaders, Christian leaders of all time, and has done a lot of peace work. So the building of homes for the houseless would be a universalizing reality in his life.
Yeah, I can see that.
Mm-hmm.
So, what do you think?
Wow. Oh, boy. Okay. When I first read it, I didn't agree with it. But now that you explain it more, I go, okay, I can see myself fishing around this pond a little bit. So,
yeah.
Okay. Good. Well, let's pop those stages up one more time. Let me just kind of walk through, because I wrote some notes as I was noodling. If we can throw that up there. So I see in probably 1 through 3, since our growth and our maturity, the maturation process of infant to adolescence is very fast, 18 years, let's say, or let's say to 20, 26 or whatever, that getting through the synthetic conventional stage. But then we have from our quarter century all the way to 85, 90 years old to attain the next 3. So it's quite interesting if you relate this to the plasticity of the brain, where our brains all the way from 0 to once we get out of our final stage of puberty, our brains are very plastic, moldable, shapeable, and that's why trauma, it's so easy for trauma for children to create neural pathways in the brain. just looking at neurobiology very simply and how psychology, neurobiology coexist. So, our brains are very plastic. Then they turn hardened, literally, like hard-headed, if you want to use that metaphor. But it's very difficult to teach an old dog new tricks. So, so the older we get, if we're not set up with the right environment I would say, in the individuative, reflective environment, if we're not set up properly to experience that stage, then we have a chance of never maturing in our faith.
Yeah.
And I think, Shreya, you nailed something that has been existing in our culture with especially the US Christianity version or Euro Christianity for literally centuries, that we do not allow. And you said it wasn't my words, that there's not an environment that we've created to allow even questioning. We allow some questions, but like even the person that's just doubting and questioning and freaking out, that Santa Claus doesn't exist, neither does Jesus, so we like have this like tear apart deconstruction phase. But if there's not an environment for it, what we do is we just say, I don't want anything to do with this anymore,
or you got to believe.
Right. And which
is not helpful.
It's not helpful. So we just stay there. And I think then going back to, you said, if we're not able, or we don't have the environment for stage 4, then we slip back into stage 3. I would actually argue that that's probably the movement that we're going to
most
make.
often.
Right. Because like, to actually go to a next stage, if stage theory is actually correct, to go to the next stage, you just can't skip a stage.
Right.
Especially this stage theory. So we bounce back to stage 3, which is the synthetic conventional. And this is where, when you ask somebody, are you a Christian? And they say, oh yeah. And then they have no
backing of that.
Like, okay, what does that mean? Does that mean you attend church? Does that mean that you got baptized one time? Does that mean that you go to Christmas, Easter services? Does that mean you bring your 80-year-old aunt to church? Or like, you get this, you're a Christian, right? And they say, yeah, I'm Presbyterian. Or or they'll say, you're a Christian, right? You'll ask that question, you're a Christian? And they'll say, well, I'm Catholic. And then they have this like differentiation from being a Christian to the identity of denomination or congregation. So they immediately, now us being like non-liturgical, or more I don't want to use these words, but more evangelical, right?
Free flow?
More non-denominational.
Yeah.
But I would argue that that's not really a thing anymore anyway. But so we're supposedly non-denominational. So we don't have those identity pieces of, well, yeah, I'm Catholic, or no, I'm Catholic, or yeah, I'm a Presbyterian, or oh, yeah, I'm Anglican, or Episcopal. Those are our identity markers, and then we stay there.
Yeah, I was thinking about how like every few years when Barna comes out with the new research about how all the young people are leaving the church, like, I think all that's happening is this movement from stage 3 to stage 4. But the stage 3 folks don't understand that it's a growing faith, and so they freak out.
Jake, do you have any continued thoughts?
Yes. trying to form them. Yeah, taking him off of Paget's
Mhm.
and going more into looking at age doesn't necessarily mean I wouldn't put an actual age on these steps.
Mhm.
I understand how they're connected to concrete
Right.
stages of development. I get that. It is, I think that every person entering into their own faith journey, no matter what, I think every religion can actually adhere to this structure as well, that they go through this process, which is great.
Mhm.
Because there is a need for a lot of people, especially like new Christians, to have concrete symbols and stories and to
Okay.
learn, no matter what age they are.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And then to move into the next understanding of this reciprocity, quid pro quo, as we said before, like God as an example of my own father, right?
Mhm.
That could be at any age. And then get into the personal myth of the narrative. I think I struggle mostly with stage 3.
What part of
How
it?
come?
I don't see it as delineated out from 2 to 4.
Okay.
I get where they're going with it.
Mhm.
I understand it. I would want to read more of why 3 is his actual stage.
Okay. You think it could be mostly lumped with 2?
I think it'd be mostly lumped with 2 and 4 together.
Oh.
So I think the difference in between 2 to 4 is this idea of 2 is things that are outside of my control.
Okay.
And 4 is the things that are inside of my control, I have a responsibility for.
Mm-hmm.
And that is my own personal myth and identity. Any thoughts?
Well, I think
What you're
go ahead.
What you're saying makes sense. I'd also, I think, have to do a little more reading to get into that. Yeah.
Make it plainer, Jake. Like, say it more plain.
Gosh, I'm trying. The guy, like, the conformity to a personal myth and identity, I think, moves you from stage 2 to 4, where things are not, like, 2 is everything in the universe is outside of my control. Like, there's a strong sense of justice, reciprocity, like it says,
right,
but everything is outside of my control.
Mm-hmm.
And I am just a pawn in this play. And then 4 is I do have responsibility and control of some things,
right,
my belief structure, my values, my learning, my understanding of the universe. And that comes from a personal myth and identity. So maybe I just answered the question of 2 is this, 3 is the step from 2 to 4.
That's why we call this our thinking space, huh?
There you go. That's it.
Well, I think that if I think about so if I include age back in, right, adolescence, personal myth is actually a psychological, psychotherapeutic idea.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a reason he's following, psychology with this a
Right.
little bit. And if you look at what's developed in adolescence, a personal story, identity in a normal, like, how can you say normal? Not normal. In a
Like a safe environment, is that where you're going?
yeah, in a safe environment, in a healthy environment.
Mhm.
Let's just say healthy environment. In a healthy environment, identity is shaped and formed through our personal identity, the values that we cling on. That this is why social justice becomes a really passionate subject right now, with like probably 7th grade all the way through high school. Is a really passionate subject with junior high and high schoolers. And I would say that personal myth would be the identity and the can we use the word story that is shaping that.
Mhm.
And so you allow what's being taught to you to shape that story, which shapes your identity. This is why it's super toxic right now for a youth pastor or an adult pastor or a children's pastor to lie basically to adolescent children about the Bible, because once they figure it out,
Yeah.
then that whole set of identity and values and story becomes crumbling. And that's why you said when that next stage, they end up in this more deconstruction, questioning type environment. They go, wait a minute, like that's not what Pastor Kevin told me.
Right.
And then their whole world crumbles at that. And I've witnessed that happen.
And they question everything at that point.
Well, they just throw it all out, because we taught one version of the creation story, and then they wake up and hear something different, and therefore Jesus can't be, resurrected anymore. And the whole thing comes crashing down for them. So I think that it's a valid stage. At what point does that happen? Because you said we could get stuck in stage 3. So I think that's why, Jake, you're probably struggling with, well, stage 3 doesn't seem like it fits, because I think there's a lot of people stuck there.
Yeah.
Because actually, you're right, Sheree, it does not happen at the level that it needs to happen.
Right. Something else I was thinking about was how a framework like this kind of gives a picture of what Reconstruction can look like. Like something I think happens a lot is that when you're in the process of deconstructing your faith, you deconstruct the content or the beliefs, but not the form. So like you can start out as a biblical literist and be super dogmatic about that. And then, you learn things, cognitive dissonance comes up, all of a sudden, biblical literalism isn't true. Therefore, the whole Bible must be false. And now I'm an atheist and I'm totally against the Bible and Christianity and all of that stuff. And like, we've stayed in the same stage of faith. We've just swapped out the content. So I don't think a full deconstruction, reconstruction process has occurred there, because it's only the content that was deconstructed and not the form.
So how do you think the Enneagram relates to this, like our personality types? So if you look at a personality type, they're going to gravitate towards
A certain stage.
more of a certain stage than others. So if I'm a 7 on the Enneagram, or I'm entrepreneurial, or I'm an ENFP according to Myers-Briggs, I'm, whatever, label me whatever you want to label me, a serial entrepreneur. I probably have this I probably live in a stage a little more often than probably is healthy for me.
Yeah, I would think so. Using 7s as example, it's pretty common for 7s to avoid unpleasant feelings or situations, right? So
It's time to move on.
right. So
yeah,
actually engaging in the difficulty of stage 4 could be really difficult.
Definitely.
But if you're a 4 on the Enneagram, you kind of live for those unpleasant feelings. And so you might be very comfortable just sitting in stage 4 for a while.
I have been sitting in stage 4 for a while, actually. If I was completely honest, I mean, stage 4 has been just,
it sucks.
Actually, it doesn't for me. If you think about like the idea of personal myth, right? The things that shaped who I am, I think you have to go back to who the hierarchy of needs.
Maslow.
That's a different person.
All three of us said it differently.
Yeah, Maslow's hierarchy.
Maslow. It's not Pavlov, that's for sure.
It's not Pavlov. Yeah. So Maslow. Sorry, it's Maslow. His hierarchy of needs. We were taught certain things about what we needed. I mean, honestly, you were taught at some point that you needed air to breathe and water and sleep and some kind of food, and maybe we were taught a poor set of that. We were taught a poor foundational set of needs. If you move to like security, sociability, psychology, those kinds of needs, our story, our backgrounds, our environments, our growing up, how we were raised, all of that interplays with that hierarchy of needs, coming to self-actualization of, I'm at one with myself, and I come up with a set of values and set of, let's say, problem solving skills, and I'm able to navigate through conflict and able to just live life now. So now I have this personal identity. But simultaneously, my brain, that's why with children are very resilient. Children can get hurt and they can make it. They really can make it. And you think about like what happens to us as an adult versus children. Lots of things happened to me as a child that I think that if it happened to me today, I don't know if I could recover. But because it happened to me as a child with a very plastic brain, and yes, I developed neural pathways that maybe weren't healthy and such, but I was able to grow through them and able to change. And I think that one of the things that changes the plasticity of our brain, the neuroplasticity of our brain, is an actual thing, is probably play, music, play, creativity, using my brain to develop and work with hands. And it's kind of like you're knitting, Sharia, like actually being creative helps develop the neuroplasticity of your brain. Your brain isn't as hard because of those things. So new ideas and new thoughts, and I'm not so closed to the world. And that's what it takes to move, I think, from stage 3 through 4 to 5
Is play.
is some form, and it's proven that and if you watch Huberman's listen to Huberman's podcast online, just go huberman.com, hubermanlab.com. You will find different techniques and ideas to change the neuroplasticity of our brains, and be able to move through stages, to be more open. Like mindfulness is one of those things that changes the neuroplasticity of our brain. And that's why mindfulness is so important to reduce stress, because stress many times is because we're facing unknown realities. So we face something that's unknown and we're just taken off guard, and oh my goodness, now I need to do this and I can't figure that out. Well, mindfulness and becoming mindful of situations changes neuroplasticity. I think exercise can do the same thing. I think entering into competitions where you're like with people and exercising and like running a race could literally change the
what's that called? It's a selected stress. You're putting yourself under.
Yeah. A very healthy, selected stress that makes your brain operate differently. It's muscle memory.
Well, just that, like you are putting yourself into such a stressful situation that you basically are creating a crisis for yourself.
But it doesn't necessarily have to be a crisis, because when I was in counseling once, my counselor looked at me, and it's always stuck with me, and I know what he was doing. He said, I want you to get up every day and take a shower and brush your teeth and get ready for the day. And I want you to start your day by going out and smelling the roses. And I just kind of looked at him like, okay, I don't know where roses grow, but but that's the first thing I thought. And then the second thing I thought was, okay, I get what you're saying, but then what good is that? And when I started practicing just going for a walk, looking at nature, being involved in creation, it literally changed my mind. It changed my mind.
I think we can also talk about the liminality of each step as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, that's that's the spaces in between.
The spaces in between. So liminality is an idea of, gosh, what was his name? Talking about when you walk through the doorway into the next stage of life. And so a walkabout.
I'll look him up here really quick. Liminality was developed by an anthropologist by the name of keep talking.
Like the Maasai and their hunting trips, or the Aborigines in Australia and their walkabouts, or they have different coming of age ideas that moves a person from childhood to adulthood. And like in the Western culture, we lack that significant step.
You're thinking of Victor Turner. Probably it was first developed by Arnold van Gennep, but you're thinking of Victor Turner.
Yes, and I'm not quite sure I'm thinking of, but that's probably
it's probably who you're thinking of.
Like in the Latina culture, it's quinceañeras, and you have major liminal experiences from stage of life to stage
bar
of life.
Bar mitzvahs for Jewish tradition.
Yeah, bat mitzvahs, bar mitzvahs. What are some other ones?
Well, a liminal experience for just common culture would be a graduation.
Yeah.
So going to a graduation ceremony is like a liminal experience.
Next stage. Yeah, that's a very common one. Each of these stages that we're looking at right now have some sort of liminality from point to point. And so just the verbiage change of how much at each stage you're taking on responsibility piece by piece. And so a lot of the times we talk about faith having to be our own, or faith being not our parents' faith or our understanding. I think it's wrong to say our personal relationship with Jesus. I don't think we should ever go to that stage, that step. But how you personally understand things and take responsibility for that.
So if you think about liminal experiences, liminality, there's, if I'm actually pointing at the chart that you've put up here, but nobody can see me do that. So if you look at the different stages, if you can slip into between each stage and write the word liminality or liminal experience. And what a liminal experience does is it pulls you out of the environment that you're in and puts you back into a different environment. So it comes from some anthropologists that studied tribal life and how when you were a child in a tribe, you were many times only raised by the mother. In many tribes in our world, that is a reality, that you're only raised by the mother. The fathers, are out doing other things. Very, very much, probably stereotypical ideas that the males and the females do in this kind of setting. When the child gets old enough, and this is the study that Victor Turner did, where he studied when children got to a certain age, they left the mother's camp and they went with the dads, and the dads took them out into the wilderness, and then they had this experience. Now, some of us would think that experience is fairly violent, and pretty much life altering and maybe even traumatic. Yet that's what some tribes engage in, is they go on a big hunting expedition, or they go, this is where sometimes the males, the boys are circumcised. They will go do that, or they'll go have literally a physical and mental and spiritual experience outside of the camp. Then when they enter back into the camp, they live in the male side of the camp. So they don't go back to the female side of the camp, they go to the male side again. So that was a study done way back in the day on tribal liminality. But what was interesting to me when I've studied liminality is you move in social hierarchy. So when you get old enough in one level or one stage, you're like big man on campus, big lady on campus, you're like the cream of the crop, I'm the mature one or whatever. And then when you go through the liminal experience and enter that next stage, you're very immature.
At the bottom again.
You're at the bottom of the social hierarchy again. So if you applied that same principle, what it takes to move in social hierarchy is social activity, which is what we call community. And so each one of these stages, a requirement, almost, I would say, to move from one stage to the next and have some kind of liminal experience between the two, would be a community of people around us helping us through the process or through the stage. I think it would be impossible to do this literally on your own.
Yeah. Well, and something that came up for me as you were saying that, like, I think when we have communities where most folks are stuck in a stage 3 and not able to move beyond that, nobody else is able to move beyond that either, because you don't have your like elders, so to speak, who have gone to the next stage and can walk you through that process.
Yeah.
So then you're just keeping your whole community stuck in immaturity.
Yeah, it's a
especially
control.
especially in stage 4.
Mhm.
You know, not to name call, but there's certain like what we would deem cultish groups in our United States that act very controlling when you try to move from 3 to 4 to 5.
Right.
That's just not an option. 4 is not an option, and they expect you to move from a very I guess synthetic conventional faith to a universalizing faith. No, actually they wouldn't
No.
even
They want to keep you right there.
They believe
Yeah.
that people who believe that their way is the highway keep you at stage 3.
Mhm.
No questions allowed.
Yeah.
Oh,
Power comes with keeping people below
Right.
yeah. Mhm.
and the same level that you are in.
Right.
Right. And part of stage 3 is your whole identity is attached to this group. So anyone asking questions is a direct threat to your identity.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
That's why they call books that are, well, question or knock their cultish religion. They call that material anti-material. They think that it's anti. So they actually do not, many times, some of these groups, these religious groups, do not allow their congregants to even read, get educated, seek counseling. They don't seek counseling. They don't seek help of any kind. It's only help within the group, only books within the group. It's very closed.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Oh,
because they want to stop those liminal experiences.
right.
Right.
So where do you think tradition fits into this?
What do you mean?
Well, we have traditions
Yeah.
like Advent.
Uh-huh.
We have traditions like Easter traditions as well.
Okay.
You could even say that dyeing eggs is a tradition of the church.
Sure.
Traditions like the ecclesiological or liturgical calendar, the rhythms,
like
the seasons.
Traditions like a baptism, communion.
Well, I would say that baptism is probably a liminal style experience. I would argue for that, but
I would argue that everything you said could produce liminality.
Yeah.
Or does it produce stuckness?
No, I think that like in the right context, dyeing eggs or even Advent or Lent or however you do them and perform them could move you on to a deeper and more free understanding. When we talk about things that can trigger, and we are talking about triggering deconstruction from concreteness to abstract to openness. I think if I put the last stage as openness,
Yeah.
I think that those traditions, those ideas can actually trigger the next step. That's why we have them.
Yeah. So in stage 3, you develop the ability to see and hold multiple meanings in a given story or a given ritual or tradition. And I think you still carry that gift as you move into the other stages as well. So I think all along the journey, there's room for our traditions to surprise us and delight us and bring new things and feelings to our understanding. Yeah, and potentially produce change, produce a liminal experience.
Definitely.
Yes. But
no,
oh,
no, and And-
Yes, and
Okay.
I get what you're saying. I'm just struggling with, because I am, I'm probably a traditionalist too much about, certain things. And I find myself very stuck sometimes because of my traditions. So for example, like the Advent season, this week we were supposed to talk about hope. And I did write on hope for the sermon. Yet I kept asking myself, how many sermons have I written and preached on hope? And people still, number one, don't get it. And number two, do we have to talk about this again, like right now? So sometimes I feel like a calendar or a tradition. This is the season we're in, and we have to preach these things, or teach, or do, or hang the gold flags or whatever. That it creates a grounding, yes, but because my brain is so seven exploratory, that I sometimes feel held back in a sense. That's why I took the hope sermon and said, do I have to preach this way every year? And I'm like, no, I don't. I'm not going to, because I'm that way is not producing the effect that I want
to have,
and I desire for people to have.
Mhm.
So it took me, well, maybe that's what you're saying then.
I think it could be. Yeah.
That if I do something every year and have to do it, I have to figure out how to do it differently. Otherwise, it's just a regurgitation of vomit.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a certain point where, like, if you have changed and grown, then doing the same old thing isn't integrity to where you're at.
Yeah. Could we put some links in the show notes today, that if somebody wanted access to Fowler's book, or that, now I know that that's probably a copyrighted stage format that we pulled from somewhere. So maybe Fowler's book on Stages of Faith, could we give that link? Because I want to go back and read Fowler's stuff and probably do some foundational original research look too of what he's basing this on. And because I really find, Shrey, you kind of blew my mind a little bit with stage 4, where I was like, wow, okay, there could be so much growth in that stage, but because you said we're afraid, or we're, we don't, it's uncomfortable. There's reasons why that's uncomfortable, and that stage, doesn't have to be uncomfortable. It could be celebrated.
Right.
Finally, you're questioning your faith. And that somebody can grow through that and come up with like new thoughts and new ideas and amazing ministry ideas and contribution to our society, versus the same.
Right.
I think you nailed something. That I think that's why I'll give the conclusion, and the audacious conclusion, that probably that's why the church is where it's at today, is because people are not allowed that stage. Maybe that's too broad of a conclusion, but I would say that that's one of the major reasons that environment is not a healthy platform.
And that when people do start a deconstruction process, that there's so much fear around it.
As you're sitting there with a Buddha behind your head.
Well, you're sitting there with a gorilla behind your head.
I know. Is that the gorilla right there?
Right there, you got it.
I think I have. I don't know. Is it up there?
Yeah, you have the 7 dharmas.
That's the Eightfold Path of Buddhism right there.
All right.
Yeah, there we go. So maybe I'm more of a universalization person than is it universalization?
Universalizing.
Universalizing. Okay. Universalizing. That's an interesting word to me. All right. Thanks, Sharayah. That was awesome.
Yeah.
Very good. All right. Any concluding thoughts?
I think we gave them. I think we're good.
Okay. Excellent. Thanks everybody for joining us. Again, if you want to ask questions or if you want the link to James Fowler's book, you can look in the show notes and click on that, probably buy it from that conglomerate site that it'll lead you to. You can purchase it online and get that information and probably download it and just listen to it on an ebook form. I'm sure that's available too. So we'll get that to you. Thanks, Sharayah, for all your work this week in presenting this material and putting it together for us. And if you have any other materials that support this, give us those links and we can drop those in the show notes today. All right. With that, good night, everybody.